Hey you beautiful people, it's me. I'm talking to you guys about one of my favorite pastimes, Dungeons and Dragons. Like, I got a book and everything. I know, I'm really professional at this. I wanted to hop on, I wanted to just kind of start making this kind of content because I very much enjoy this game, storytelling vessel. I think it's quite enjoyable, and what I wanted to do very specifically was go through and talk about each of the spells, what they do, kind of a little bit behind them, and how they're applicable. And so that's kind of what I want to go through and talk about. First off, we're just going to go down the list alphabetically, starting with the Player's Handbook. Player's Handbook? Almost said Player's Guide, and I'm like, that's not right. We're just going to go through Player's Handbook and just through all of them. First of all, we have Acid Splash, which is a cantrip. It's a conjuration cantrip. Conjuration meaning that you bring forth something. And like, for example, summoning a being is conjuration. You're conjuring something up. Acid Splash falls under this category at a casting time of 1 action, so about 6 seconds. So the interesting thing about this is it's a verbal and somatic. Verbal and somatic means that verbally you have to say an incantation. And for whoever character that you have or you've created, there are different verbal incantations you can say. For example, if you would like, you can just say Acid Splash and the casting begins. It's also somatic, so that means you have to wave your hands all funny and go blah, and then shablam shablamo. Since it takes about 6 seconds and needs verbal and somatic components, which is what it's called, they need anybody who is casting it, so that could be any wizard, sorcerer, or artificer, those are the ones who are able to cast it, would need to make sure that their hands are not bound and their mouth is not gagged, or they're not under the spell, I believe it would be silence, so they can speak clearly. It's pretty interesting. The duration is instantaneous, which makes sense since it is a damage-dealing immediate cantrip, so that means as soon as you toss it somewhere, it instantaneously does its thing. Right now, just got the breakdown and description of it. You hurl a bubble of acid. Choose 1 or 2 creatures you can see within range of 60 feet. If you choose 2, they must be within 5 feet of each other, or if you're looking at a grid, they have to be right next to each other on the squares, or hexagons, depending on how you do that. The target, or multiple targets, must succeed a dexterity saving throw or take 1d6 acid damage. And then this goes up once you reach 5th level, 11th level, and 17th level by 2d6, 3d6, and 4d6. Now, this is a pretty dope cantrip, and I'll explain a little bit of why. First of all, you're able to deal damage towards 2 different creatures if they fail their dex save. And that's a bit of a gamble in and of itself, because around the time that you are using cantrips, mostly you are using cantrips to save your spell slots for something really important, or you're low level. And when you're low level, none of your stuff lands. Everyone succeeds. Low level is a rough grind. Low level, I mean 1 to 3. About 1 to 3 is really rough levels, because you're just getting started with your character or your class. It can be incredibly difficult, but all in all, it's still pretty good because you're able to hit 2 different people, which is incredibly useful for a cantrip. And since it's also dealing acid damage, not very many creatures are resistant or immune to acid damage unless they are rising up from acid or poison, or like they're vats, or they emit an acidic damage attack, which you can usually tell when a creature like that exists. So like, for example, if a troll is bubbling and festering with like sores and stuff like that, you might be able to assume either poison or acid, so you might stay away from something like that, and you would use fire, because fire is your go-to, although very many creatures are resistant to it. But Acid Splash is pretty good, all things considered, for a conjuration cantrip that you can get right off the bat for most of your spellcasting folks, which is, it's very nice. It's very nice. Something that I find interesting about this is that the way that it says you hurl a bubble of acid, and the verbal and somatic components kind of limit you on a couple of the things that you would want to do, because there's no direction for material components, such as with Fireball, which everyone knows very well. You need bat guano or a bit of sulfur to allow that to do its thing. For this one, since there's no material components, I like to imagine that you clasp your hands together, you open up a small bubble, and then you toss it like a volleyball or something like that. For every character or player, they can choose something a bit different, of course. This is all just kind of a rough idea and explanation of what I think. I think it's pretty cool. I think that you were able to melt somebody's face from a good distance away. 60 feet's really good. And if you've got two people standing right next to each other, they're 60 feet away and they're talking shit, you can just be like, bam. Granted, they can succeed and they don't even take half damage because cantrips. But all in all, I think it's very good. Anyway, I'll leave that here. This is a shorter one since it's just a simple cantrip, but I will be seeing you in the next video. Thank you so much and have a good day. Bye.